I'm afraid I'm going to go into this spiral, into this thought process of like, my life is so boring that I don't want to live it. I live a somewhat chaotic life compared to other people. I love new things. I love pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. That's largely because I stayed in an environment for 20 years of my life, i.e. Missouri, that was a box.
So what is your biggest fear about going back into that box? What would that mean about you?
Growing up, I never felt good enough. I made it my life mission to be seen as enough. But one of the biggest insecurities I still have to this day is being seen as boring. I wondered if maybe I was boring, and I didn't want to be that, because if I accepted the fact that I was boring, who really likes boring? And I realized, I was like, it's never as bad as you think it is, right? But we always think worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking worst case scenario. If I go face boredom and say, let me go be bored, I'm like, I have these thoughts of, if I'm to the point where I get so bored, I'm fearful that I might just be like, what's the point of life? Like, I'm afraid I'm going to go into this spiral, into this thought process of like, my life is so boring that I don't want to live it. I know I keep chasing dopamine. I keep chasing excitement because I'm scared to be bored, because I'm fearful that if I get there, that those thoughts are going to overtake me. Welcome, everyone, to the Beyond the Cover podcast. My intent with creating this podcast was to provide a platform where men can speak openly about their journeys with mental health without fear of judgment while doing so. While I, the host, or you, the listener, may not agree with everything or anything that a certain guest says for that matter, my focus is not to decipher what is right or wrong. Rather, it's to gain a better understanding of why somebody thinks and acts the way that they do. And with this understanding, we will begin to make better sense of our own lives and the world around us. So join me as we open the books into these men's journeys and dissect the pages within. Today's guest is Emily Freeman. Emily is a relationship coach that has helped thousands of men find their dream partner. Today's episode is one that surprised me because not only does Emily share some incredible insight into what it takes to find your dream partner, but she also broke me down a bit. I was not anticipating that, but it's a beautiful thing when you have healthy, organic conversations. That's what we had today. You're going to be absolutely in for a treat to learn more about Emily and glean some of the insight that she has. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Emily Freeman, welcome to Beyond the Cover.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I am very excited for you to be here as well, because selfishly, I think a lot of the things that you will share today will be a goldmine for me. Things that I can take, and some woman down the road is going to thank you for steering me in the right direction. But also many of the other men out there that may not realize that they are causing self-inflicting wounds. Self-sabotage is a very real thing. And I think a lot of men don't realize some of their behavior that is causing them to be single.
Sure. And
it can be changed. So a little backstory on you. You are a dating and attraction coach.
Yes.
You have helped thousands of men find their, whether you call it a forever partner or high value
dream woman.
Yes. So with that, I mean, you've taken a deep dive into the mind of a man, I would imagine, because your sample size is in the thousands.
Yes.
And so I want to dive into that because I also think too, a lot of people that follow me, there's a large majority of the individuals are women, and they probably want to know what's going on in the mind of a man as well. They're like, what's happening? This guy does this, and I just don't get it. And men also say we're like clueless as far as like, what's the right thing to do? You know, why does she not responding back? I thought we had a great date. There's just all these things that probably are left unsaid, but can be uncovered. And that's, I think, where we're going to take this today, is really just diving into that. So one of the things that I saw on your website, you mentioned being a high value man. Can you define that for me?
Yes.
What is a high value man?
So we can talk about it both through the lens of a high value man or a high value woman, right? So Someone who is high value, I see in two parts, right? So I define it in two different ways. So what makes them high value in totality is them being able to be a good partner to you.
Okay.
So a high value person or a high value partner is somebody who would actually enhance your life, who's going to make your life easier, better, more enjoyable, more exciting, more stable. So there's the two categories that I talked about that define this. So the first are the universal traits that make somebody a great partner. So emotional availability, communication skills, introspection, right? Self-awareness. And then there's the category that makes them specifically high value to you.
Okay.
Right? So that's depending on your lifestyle, what your vision is for your life, what your goals are. Do you want someone who also wants a family? Right? So what high value really means is somebody who's going to be your perfect counterpart. And that might be somebody who has some similar traits as you, and somebody who has also some balancing traits as you.
My first thought right away is, again, that perfect counterpart. I saw on your social media, you seem to be in a very, very happy relationship. Like you found that perfect individual. Is there also though the idea like that should there be the belief that like, hey, this person needs to come in, and if they're not perfect right out the gate, it's not going to work? Or can somebody check 8 of the 10 boxes as long as they're, then you basically that you hope that they're receptive to making the other 2 work?
Well, if someone was looking for perfection, I would still be single.
Yeah, fair enough. And that was kind of a rhetorical question, but yes, yeah.
So this is why it's so important, and what I take my clients through, both men and women, is understanding what that perfect person looks like to you, right? If you could have it all, let's put practicalities aside. Who is that person? And then let's look at this list and really identify, okay, what is a true deal breaker? What's something that you need to have in your life? And what's something that is a nice to have?
Okay.
And it's really important in this process. A lot of people start with the end result.
Okay.
So in my last relationship, I didn't like that, she didn't appreciate how busy I was and always wanted me to stay at home more and be with her more. She would complain about how much I work. So therefore, I need a woman who also works just as hard as me. Okay. That way she gets it.
Yeah.
Well, now you might end up in a relationship with a woman who works just as hard as you, and now neither of you see each other.
Yeah.
And you might even be in competition with each other, right?
Yeah.
So instead of going, I need this, it's instead going, what feeling do I actually want to experience in my relationship? I want that freedom. I want someone who gets me. I want someone who celebrates my wins, who appreciates me, who shows me adoration for what I'm building and creating. And that might be a woman who has just as successful and busy of a career, or it might be a woman who's doing something completely different. But when you go first to the end result, well, now you might be actually looking for a woman that's not right for you and missing out on the woman that would be right for you, right? Or man.
Yeah. There's this, so with what you've seen with the matches that you've made for individuals, helping them find their person, we've heard the phrase like opposites attract. Is it a widespread range of like opposites may attract in work? You've seen it where two similar people work really well as well, or does there need to be some type of like balance where like, hey, this person's high energy, so this person most likely needs to be lower energy. This person is always working, so this person needs to be more supportive and maybe more not be as focused in on their job. I mean, or are you seeing it across the board? You've seen people that are workaholics match and be perfect matches. You've also seen people that are, one's a workaholic, the other person doesn't work hardly at all. I mean, is it just kind of like it's all open? I mean, none of it, there's no like strict formula like, hey, if you're a workaholic, then we need to find somebody that's going to have all this time available.
I wouldn't say I've seen a strict formula or would suggest a strict formula for that, simply for the reason that it's so much more about values.
Okay.
And where I think a lot of people get the opposites attract, like where they get in trouble with that, is what we're really talking about is polarity, right?
Okay.
So that feeling of the magnets, a positive charge, negative charge comes together, right? That's how a magnet works.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about polarity, what a lot of the times people get confused with is they feel this pull towards somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, this feels really electric. This feels really good. This must be chemistry. This must be a sign that this is somebody for me. But what's really happening is our subconscious beliefs are counteracting each other's.
Okay.
So this is where we get into attachment theory, right? We could go down a whole rabbit hole of that. But attachment theory, right? There's 3 insecure attachment types. Anxious, avoidant, and fearful avoidant, also known as anxious avoidant.
Okay.
And each one has a subconscious fear. And what happens is the opposing subconscious fears are drawn to each other because you end up actually reflecting back your worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And because it's in our subconscious and it's on repeat, it's what we're expecting to happen in a relationship. So a lot of the times, the reason why a relationship doesn't work out is not because 2 people work a lot. It's because one person uses work to escape from the relationship and to avoid.
Yeah.
And the other person is using work because they're not fully satisfied in the relationship. And so then no matter how much they're working, they're going, hey, I want to spend more time with you. Like, please spend more time with me. And they may be asking for time. Quality time might be one of their love languages, but they're likely asking for presence.
Okay. Yeah. That's actually, you make a really good point that hits home for me. An example of this was I was in a relationship where this individual said that, I worked a lot and I worked from home and they'd be at home too. And she's like, you don't see me. I'm like, well, I'm working. So once, the work hours end, then I'll turn my attention to you. And I said, okay, here's what I want to do. I'll set aside 2 hours a night. Where I can give you my undivided attention. I'm thinking like, hey, 2 hours is a good amount of time. And this will be the fix because she doesn't feel like we spend enough time together. And so then what would happen though, is I'd get to that point where there's the 2 hours and I'd say, what do you want to do? And she's like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, whatever, we can do whatever. It ended up not fixing the problem. And then finally one day, when there was a breakdown in communication and a fight ensued, what came out was she's like, it's not even about the time. That really is not what it's about. I don't need your 2 hours. I want presence.
Yes.
I want you to just consider me for, even if it's for 15 seconds, you go to brush your teeth and you put toothpaste on the toothbrush and bringing it to me. She's like, that would make me happy and just shows that you're thinking of me. It's not even about the duration. It's about the quality of the time, not the quantity. That was very eye-opening for me. I mean, that flipped the script on me. And I remember a week later, I did just that. I put toothpaste on her toothbrush and brought it into her and she broke down crying.
Aww.
And was like, I love you so much. Like, this is all I want. And I was like, wait, so all I have to do is a 15-second act and it makes her entire day. But it was because I was thinking of her. Then I started to okay, now when I'm going to get coffee, I'm going to call her, text her. Do you want coffee? I'm coming back. I think that's something where maybe it's a rational thing that most men rationalize it as hey, okay, you want more of my time. Where it's no, I want more of the intention. I want more of your, I want you more purposeful time with you. I want you to really give me your energy, not just give me this. So that was something that I saw I self-sabotaged myself with. What are some other self-sabotaging behaviors you've seen with men? Because I imagine there's probably many.
Well, making a woman a checklist item is definitely one of them, right?
Yeah,
which is what she probably felt like. Oh, he's checking the box.
Yeah.
Right. I said I want time. He's giving me time. But, another way that goes into the example that you talked about is not leading. And I mean, leading the dating process, leading a relationship, that's a huge topic to cover. But ultimately in that moment, you stopped leading, right? You stopped pursuing her.
Okay.
And for the feminine, it is so important to feel seen, to feel that affirmation, and not coming from an insecure place. It's affirmation from your partner that he sees you, that he knows you, in the same way that men crave that respect, right? So men really want to be respected. The masculine needs that respect, right? Respect the boundary that when I'm working, and then I'll give you the 2 hours. Well, her actually giving you that showed you respect, which would help strengthen your bond. And so, making sure that you have a plan and have thought about what would make her feel special, even if it's just come here on the couch with me and grabbing her and holding her close, right? It's not necessarily that you need to have a whole date night set up. but just having an intention behind the time that you're spending together.
Yeah.
So that's another way. I would also say what plays into your example is listening. So a lot of men forget to listen. A lot of women forget to listen too, for all the women listening. And the reason why we don't listen is because a lot of the times when we hear something that activates a wound, a scar, then we shut down.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times that wound is simply, I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to be enough. She's always going to want more. He's always going to want more. And so you just shut down. Right?
Yeah.
Or it might be, oh my gosh, I'm already so stressed out and so busy. Like I can't hear this right now. This is too much. When in reality, it's just what they're talking about is activating a fear in you around yourself, the relationship, etc.
Yeah.
Now, of course, our phones make it that much harder to listen because it's another outlet for us to just disassociate.
Yeah.
But listening is a huge one. Another self-sabotaging pattern. I mean, that's 3. Do you want a 4th?
I'll take as many because I'm just thinking of each of them. I'm like, yep, I've done that at one point. Yes. I mean, attentive listening, again, to your point, like people, I think people in general want to just feel seen and heard.
Yeah.
It's not specific to women. Men also want to feel 100%. The same way.
Yeah.
And most people nowadays do just, everyone can talk about themselves. That's super simple, right? I just why do you think the main reason is though why people, is it just they have a discomfort with they don't know what questions asked, they don't have the emotional fortitude or the intelligence to ask the questions? I mean, I would say that, again, I grew up in an environment where household of men. I mean, I didn't even know how to ask any question. It was just like, go show people how great you are, go be a doer. We didn't really reflect upon anything. And so do you think that in your experience, have you seen a lot of men just don't have the ability to ask the right questions, or what's stopping them from being that attentive listener? You mentioned social media, the phones being a distraction. Is there anything else that's holding men back from doing that?
Well, in the dating process, I think clarity is a huge piece of that. So if you don't know what you're looking for, or you're only consumed with making sure that person likes you, then you're not going to get curious. Right? And curiosity is a very important piece of being able to ask a question.
Yeah.
And clarity is what helps create that curiosity. So if you know that you're looking for someone who's going to support your goals and ambitions or let you travel around the world when you want to, then you know what type of questions that you want to ask that person.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times we don't know what questions to ask other people because we haven't asked ourselves the same questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you have a deep, deep relationship with yourself, then you can have a deeper relationship with somebody else. But if you haven't started asking yourself the deeper questions, the questions that actually build intimacy with you, it's going to be really hard to, one, even know what the questions are. But even if you do know what the questions are, have the courage to actually ask it.
Yeah.
Because if you're not even willing to go there, how would you expect someone else to? And then the fear of rejection comes up, right? Like, oh my gosh, what if I say this wrong or ask this wrong? Or what if it offends them?
Yeah.
What if they don't want to go that deep? Right? So then again, instead of you getting to know someone out of a sense of curiosity and clarity and knowing what you want, now you're just making sure that you're not doing anything wrong and that you're not rejected. And so then you get into another spiral of, okay, well, I can't ask this. And oh gosh, now I'm screwing this up because I haven't said anything and I haven't asked any questions. And I'm just tapping out now.
Yeah. Overthinking. Yeah.
Overthinking's another sabotaging pattern for sure.
Yes. It will absolutely kill the mood. It'll kill that environment that you're in where, I mean, I personally try to be more conscious about being a better question asker. Previously, like in my day-to-day and the things that I've done, I have a lot of people that ask me questions. They always want to know what's going on in my life and this, that, and the other. Well, it created this environment where I was always answering questions, going on a million podcasts. What happened is I just became a talker, always talking. I thought, and then I would get into these situations in a dating environment where I'm just talking. And then I started having this little thought in my head being like, you need to ask a question. You need to ask a question right now. Think of something. And I think that was good because the intention was there was to, hey, like, let's turn this back so this person feels that they're also in this. It's not a one-sided,
Yeah.
it's not an interview, but now this is like going both directions.
Mm-hmm.
But very, very early on in my journey on with self-reflection, I didn't know what to ask. I didn't even know what question to ask myself. So I had to go to therapy to like start hearing these questions and go, okay, I can actually take some of these questions and use them in my day-to-day.
Mm-hmm.
But before, I didn't have the confidence. And so I'm looking across the table at somebody and I don't even know what to ask. So I'd ask the superficial questions.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do for work? I don't think I ever asked what's your favorite color. I think people joke when they say like, I'm like, I've never actually asked that, but what do you like to do in your free time? I mean, these things I think they're important, but I actually find myself nowadays never actually asking those. Those questions come like way later.
Yeah.
I'm asking, and on that, in that same thought process, I'm curious. Can you say too much on a first date? Like, can you trauma dump? Can you say you go to a point where like you're actually repelling a person? I mean, I think the answer to that is yes. But if we can do a broad stroke, like women in general, and I know there's always outliers,
mm-hmm.
but is there a point at which you overshare that most women would say like that, and that's too much?
Mm-hmm.
I can think from a very specific example. I went on a date like 6 months ago. I wanted this individual to know that I was very open with my emotions and that I had this emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I start talking about the past trauma that I've overcome, very well received.
Mm-hmm.
I start talking about the present trauma that I'm dealing with. I saw her flip.
Mm-hmm.
I could feel this change she went into like caregiving mode,
Mm.
Like a motherly instinct. Let me help you. Let me fix this.
Mm-hmm.
And it just all of a sudden felt like this one-on-one date where there was this attraction turned into like, wait, let me help you.
Mm.
And I felt as though as the attraction started to kind of fade.
Yeah.
Does that, am I overthinking it? Or like, does that happen where, do women, see sometimes like oversharing too much trauma can end up repelling?
Mm-hmm. So the way that we share our experiences is really important because what's happening on a subconscious level is when someone overshares, and this is coming from an oversharer anonymous.
I think we all maybe want
when you
to,
have a
but
big open heart, it's so hard not to, especially when you're extremely honest.
Yeah.
But it is really important because what happens is if you aren't discerning about who you're opening up to and about what,
Mm-hmm.
well, subconsciously now that person sees, oh, this actually doesn't have anything to do with me. This is for them. This is their own experience, right? How many times have you opened up about something, not because it's going to help you relate to that other person, but out of like, just, it feels like you can't even help it. Like it just happens. Or a feeling of like that validation of like, wow, yeah, I'm really like, I've experienced this, and almost like reliving it for yourself. Well, now you're not relating to that person anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when it comes to women, right? So women are very privy to when men have lines or when they have specific things that they say that they know will open a woman up, right?
Such as? Give me some examples. Let's throw them out there so that men can't do this moving forward. Let's save some women the trouble, because I know as a man that there are things that are very calculated.
Yeah. That
we can say or do.
Yeah.
I think that even like an example that most people know is there's studies that have shown that if you just create physical contact, if I put my hand on your shoulder, and this works for both men and women, if you're trying to create a stronger connection, a bond, you slap, a guy on the back as you're out having drinks with the guy. And by the end of the night, he thinks like you're buddy. Now you're hugging each other. They walk out of there and they're like, I really like him. Like we're super close. And that's a manipulation tactic you can use where I know that I can touch this person this many times. And by the end of the night, they're going to be more like pulled in thinking we have a stronger connection.
Yes.
So that's an example I can think of is just like personal touch, being able to like just put your hand on their arm. And I know people that are aware of that. So they'll do that.
Yes.
What other examples can you think of that?
I mean, anything that creates curiosity, right?
Okay.
So anything that leaves a little bit of that cliffhanger feeling. So yeah, the touch does that because there's enough touch where it's like, okay, well, what's going to come next? Anything that has to do with like teasing somebody. And I want to say this lightly because flirtation and like teasing are a very fun and important piece of dating and romance and should not be taken out.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of things that like women will look out for in men specifically is if he's promising things really far in the future. Right? Even painting the picture of like, oh yeah, it'd be so amazing if we went to Burning Man together next year and we'd have, I don't know why Burning Man just came up, but, or, you know, I love going to Italy every single summer and, you know, I just have a boat out there and this and that. And oh my gosh, it'd be so fun to take you. You know, anytime someone says, I never do this, it's like
that's
antenna. Antenna goes up.
That kind of intertwines with like, I never do this, or I'm probably not like what most men are. You know, I'm not like most men, or woman says that I'm not like most women. Yes. I instantly in my head go, okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, then what are you?
Exactly.
You have to show me that. You can't tell me. I need to see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, something else that it's really interesting. So when we talk about game playing, when these games are specifically designed to activate people's attachment styles, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of the times what's happening is a man is going to use a dig or some sort of little, you know, insult that seems cute to a woman. And a woman who actually is insecure and feels that, now she's going to be searching for validation and affirmation. But a woman whose reality, internal reality, doesn't reflect that is going to think that you're full of it.
Okay.
Right? So it's really important to look at these tactics and ask yourself, who is this attracting? Mm-hmm. What type of person am I attracting with this behavior?
Yeah.
And I'm still thinking now about the oversharing. I want to get back to it because I think it's a really important topic.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think anytime it's interesting because especially men and women are both very attuned to energy, right? That's why understanding the masculine and the feminine is so important. It's why being aligned with your beliefs is so important. Mm-hmm. But any time that the energy feels off between two people, that's another antenna moment. So a lot of that comes across as when someone is delivering something that they think they should say, but it isn't actually their truth.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not necessarily a line in particular that a man might say that a woman's antenna goes up around. It's the energy and feeling behind it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's difficult for women too, because men will paint really beautiful pictures and they will say all these amazing things. And a lot of women really want to believe that that's true. Mm-hmm. Right? So they might lean in a little bit.
Yeah.
But after getting burned by one of those, that's when women become guarded.
Yeah.
And that's when it's really important for women to do the healing work too, to be able to trust the masculine again.
Yeah.
But, you know, when it comes to oversharing, a woman feels like she's not being chosen, which is really important to a woman, is to feel chosen. When it seems like, okay, here we are just sitting down for the first time ever and you're spilling your guts to me about something. So where are your boundaries? What's that going to mean in our relationship? Mm. Who else are you going to be having this much intimacy with right away? Is this how you function in the world? Right? Because as much as you might in your head realize, oh my gosh, this woman is so special. She's so dreamy. Do men say that about women? I've never heard a man say that about women. Women say that about men.
I don't think I've ever used the dreamy adjective, but I mean, I'm just one man.
It's
so
fine.
Yeah.
I've never heard a man say it. I've talked to a lot of men.
Yeah. Well, but we think that like we want, I'm trying to think like what the male equivalent would be.
Hot. Beautiful. Amazing.
She's a smoke show. I don't know. Like we say the dumbest stuff.
So she's incredible, right? She doesn't understand that might be a foreign feeling for you, right? So that makes her feel like she could be anybody. Just in the same way as a man, when you have a woman who comes to you and is like, okay, I'm ready to get married. I'm looking for my person. And you immediately go, is she just looking for the cog in the wheel?
Yeah.
Am I just going to be the guy that fits in her timeline? Or are we actually creating a connection?
And it also feels that they're laying it on thick and there's a lot of expectation right up front. It's like, well, I'm walking into somebody it just feels like so much pressure and I'm gonna have to exert so much effort, as opposed to there being a sense of it being effortless. Mm-hmm. Not that A lot of wheels are spinning in my head right now because my social media presence, partly what I do is I overshare in general compared to most people, but I'm
Sure.
trying to show individuals that, hey, opening up, having that sense of vulnerability with the right people creates and strengthens bonds, and
Correct.
and suppression is never the answer. But there's a point, and I totally agree with you, where somebody goes, well, if he'll share this with me in the first 5 minutes, then it's not special, So, but it's also from a guy's perspective, I go, well, how many other men are having these conversations? Not many. So I see it as almost like not a secret weapon, but look, like I am different, right? Like in a sea of options, because that's what it feels like. Do you think I'm curious, do you think the dating world nowadays is easier or harder versus 20 years ago? Because I have a very strong opinion on it.
Well, when it comes to finding someone and getting married, it's definitely harder.
I would agree.
There's a lot more options.
And this is for my mom and dad listening. It's way harder. So quit saying that you guys had it harder back in the day. I want them to know that, because I'm like, it is hard. It's very hard. They had it harder in their own ways, right? This isn't a competition, but yeah, there's its own challenges. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. My mom, like they're like, Clayton, why can't you find? I'm like, there's a plethora of reasons, guys.
Well, our expectations of relationship and partnership are very different.
Okay.
Right. So in past generations, it wasn't expected that the man was going to provide and be a bestie and be emotionally open and share our feelings with. Right.
Okay,
that existed, but it wasn't the expectation or the norm.
Okay.
Right. Now, we've seen our parents' generation go through a lot of divorce. And so a lot of us have gone, okay, how do I not let that happen to me? How do I make sure that I get a partner who's not going to put me in that dynamic, right? And sometimes it's, how do I get a partner that's not like mom? How do I get a partner that's not like dad? And that can be very subconscious too.
Yes, yeah.
For a long time in my single life, well, not for a long time, but I remember there was a moment where I realized, oh my gosh, I'm trying to recreate my parents' marriage to like prove that I can make it last.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do with the people I date. Wow.
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
Yeah.
You better heal that. Right. So it's harder in the sense that there's a lot of options and there's a lot of opportunity for us to disassociate, to avoid, right? To avoid the uncomfortable emotions that come in a relationship. We are met with our mirror in relationship. We can be single and feel amazing and feel so confident. And then we start dating somebody and all of a sudden, all of our insecurities come to the surface. And it's not because necessarily that relationship is wrong or bad, right? There's a lot of nuances to that, of course.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times relationships end not because it's the wrong person, but simply because we're not willing to meet ourselves in that dynamic.
Yeah.
So as soon as it becomes uncomfortable, we're out.
Yeah.
And we know we can get on an app and start swiping again.
And just go right back into the cycle.
Yes.
And feel wanted.
And that's where the dopamine cycle comes in too, right? The dating dopamine cycle. There is a rush to meeting somebody new. There is a feeling of excitement of like, who knows what potential there is here, the possibilities of what we could create. And when that settles and you're met with the relationship piece of it, if you don't have the tools to keep that excitement going, to feel connected, to be able to build deeper intimacy, well, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And if you're more familiar with chaos, and that's what feels comfortable to you, well, being in a stable relationship might actually be uncomfortable and be the growth that you actually need to have the relationship of your dreams.
What if you just like chaos? I mean, can you dwell in it? Because I think there's growth in the chaos as well.
100%.
So can you strike the balance? Which I'm speaking selfishly. I live a somewhat chaotic life compared to other people. I love new things. I love pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. That's largely because I stayed in an environment for 28 years of my life, i.e. Missouri, that was a box. The second I opened up Pandora's box and looked beyond it, I said, wait, all this stuff exists. So I know for me, the reason I'm single, well, I'm sure there's other reasons too, but like the main reason is I am wanting to just branch out. I want to like see new cultures. I want to like see what all exists. And I can't just go back to like the confined box that I grew up within, because ignorance was bliss until it isn't. Now it's like, well, okay, now I know this exists. And then I fall into the vicious cycle of, yeah, like the options. If one thing's off, I can just go right back on, and a new Instagram DM can be sent out. Another swipe can happen. And so it feels that since there's a plethora of options, I should just look for the 100 checked boxes, because I suppose I still believe it exists. Like I can find a lot of people that can check 8 of 10 boxes. So then I go, okay, how about 9 of 10? Okay, I found 7 people in the last 3 months, whatever, that checked 9. So now I'm looking for 10. And I think that's the downfall of today's dating environment, is especially with these apps, is you have the ability to be extremely picky. It's almost like you're building a perfect partner. You just like swipe on them. Okay. And you put in the bio, I'm looking for someone. And so I see this over 6 foot, blonde, preferably blonde, hair, blue eyes. And it's like, you're just picking. And they're not looking for anything else, because they're just like, why not? I see all the options.
Sure.
Do you see that like there being any value in these dating apps, or do you think they've just gotten so out of control that we should just ditch them and completely get them, like just wipe them off the grid and go back to old fashioned dating?
I'm a big fan of dating apps. I met
You
my
are?
husband on Bumble.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did. In different states. So we navigated that, which was a lot of fun. So
how do you go about it the right way? How do you date
yes.
like in the online environment with the dating apps?
So it's important to realize that like attracts like.
Okay.
So if you are looking for the shiny object, if you are looking for the perfection, which can change every other day of what you decide perfection is, you are going to attract people who are going to do the same thing to you. So every time you think you found that 10 out of 10, 20 out of 10, well, if she's energetically aligned with you, you might not be her 10 out of 10.
Okay.
Because there's this belief out there from a lot of people that it should be perfect. Not just perfect for you, but perfect to everybody else too.
Okay.
Right? And what's also coming up is the illusion of choice and options is also allowing us to stay more in our subconscious spheres around intimacy, abandonment, rejection, right? So our insecure attachment styles for longer. Because like I said, as soon as you start to see something that doesn't feel good to you, which a lot of the times what we don't like in a person is a projection of something that we're not accepting in ourselves or are worried that we'll have in ourselves. Right? And so in order to date correctly, right, how to use the apps correctly, you first have to start with, okay, let me get really honest with myself about where I'm not showing up in a way that's actually going to allow me to attract the type of person that I want. What parts of me are actually creating this dynamic? And then you can see the parts of the other people that you would be attracting in. Law of attraction. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And that starts with your thoughts, because your thoughts create your reality. And they're going to match somebody else's.
Yeah.
Now, there was something else you said around, being afraid to get back into that box. Can I ask you a question that's maybe a little bit vulnerable?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know we're all about vulnerability here, right?
Absolutely, we are.
So what is your biggest fear about going back into that box? What would that mean about you?
My biggest fear is being bored.
Being bored. Why? What's scary about being bored?
Oh, I know exactly what it is. Growing up, I never felt good enough. And there's a whole deep story behind that. I've shared it on certain podcasts and such, but I made it my life mission to be seen as enough in the eyes of the majority. And so I went on this external validation mission.
Mhm.
And I received it, but even though every time I received it, I never felt like I was enough. I realized it was a choice I had to make to internally validate myself.
Mm.
But one of the biggest insecurities I still have to this day is being seen as boring.
Mm.
Even like when I went on TV as The Bachelor, everything was said about me online. He's a stupid football player. He's out of shape. I don't know. He's ugly. None of those things hit me.
Mm.
Kill yourself. I had people tell me that. He's like, if I find you, I'll throw a drink in your face, whatever. Like people just saying he's the dumbest person I've ever met in my life. None of that bothered me.
Mm.
The one comment that bothered me the most was he's boring.
Mm.
He's bland white bread. I saw that a million times. Like, why did they pick this guy? He's just a bland white bread. And I'm like, I hated it because I wondered if maybe I was boring, and I didn't want to be that, because if I accepted the fact that I was boring, who really likes boring?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I always thought. Like, nobody likes boring. If I asked you, would you want to be bored right now? Everyone would say, no, hell no. I don't want to be bored. So to me, it's one of the worst things I think that I could be, is boring.
Mm.
It's a deeply rooted insecurity of mine, is to ever be seen that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I am living my life trying to be anything but that.
Mm-hmm. And when we're running from something, it makes it really hard for us to actually create the stillness that we need to be partnered and to be in relationship.
I understand that. So how do I overcome that?
Right. So one of the exercises that I find the most effective for something like this is actually going to that worst case scenario and experiencing it, whether it be in your mind and envisioning it, or actually being bored for a day, for a week, for a month, and really being able to live out that fear. Because what's happening is we don't run from the circumstance that we're afraid of. We run from how it's going to make us feel about ourselves. And you pinpointed it perfectly, right? You don't feel like you're enough if you are not exciting. If you are not constantly, living on the edge or doing something new, if you're seen as boring. And so the reason why those comments didn't matter to you, that you were this football player, that you were dumb, is because you don't actually believe that about yourself.
No, I don't.
But the ones that are going to hurt us are the ones that actually reflect the way we already feel about ourselves.
1000%.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you are going to that worst case scenario and thinking through it, allowing yourself to feel what it would feel like to be bored. A lot of the times when we don't want to be bored, it's because when we're actually still and we meet ourselves there, we actually meet ourselves.
Yeah.
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 But that's some of the most exciting work ever.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've gotten into that, gone through this path of mental health for yourself. And you've likely gravitated to it so deeply because it is exciting to learn about yourself. It's empowering.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are consistently on that journey to learning more about yourself and therefore learning about someone else, is it even possible to be bored or boring?
No.
Right.
Yeah, I probably need to go back to therapy for sure. This is really insightful and eye-opening. I think this is the point you made about most often what we're running from is what that we see in ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to, everything you said today, so it basically is that for me and for everybody listening, you're single because of yourself. This isn't an external factor. This isn't because of the other people. It's because of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to set your ego aside and look within, have that introspection and say, how can I be better? Or just not even a matter of better, just how can I heal? Because that's really what it is. It's a really interesting thought process because for me, it's okay. So I have to go to a place of boredom. Well, that doesn't sound fun,
No.
right? But really, as we heal any of our insecurities, none of them are fun.
Mm-mm.
If I have a fear of rejection, then I have to face rejection.
Mm-hmm.
So that means I have to like go out there and walk up to that person. That sounds terrible,
Mm-hmm.
but it's never as bad as you think it is. I mean, I had a fear of rejection for a long period of my life as well, not feeling good enough in the eyes of women. And so what I do, I actually had to, what helped me was I actually started cold calling for work, and I got rejected 100 times a day. And then I realized that I thought everyone, when I called, would be like, don't effing call me. Like, I hate you. And I thought they'd be like, where do you live? I'm going to find you and like hunt you down. And then that never happened. Maybe every so often I got a call from someone who's like, F you, and they'd hang up. But then the reality is they'd go on with their day and they'd forget about me. They would have no idea.
Right.
They'd forget who I was. And I realized, I was like, it's never as bad as you think it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we always think worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking worst case scenario. If I go face boredom and say, let me go be bored, I'm like, I have these thoughts of, if I'm to the point where I get so bored, I'm fearful that I might just be like, well, what's the point of life?
Mm.
Like, I'm afraid I'm going to go into this spiral, into this thought process of like, my life is so boring that I don't want to live it.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, like I don't even think I was expecting that to come out in that way. Yeah, that's the hard part with like where I'm at currently. I know I keep chasing dopamine. I keep chasing excitement because I'm scared to be bored, because I'm fearful that if I get there, that those thoughts are going to overtake me.
Mm-hmm.
And that scares me. Like, it's hard because I have too much love in my life. I have too many people that I care about, that I would never ever do that. But like, to place myself in a position where I could have that ideation, that suicide, like just to have those thoughts even come up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how can I allow that? That scares me. I don't want to place myself there. So it's scary,
Yeah.
I think I need to, I need to go back into therapy, and I need to have this question with a therapist and talk through it and say, like, how can we find a healthy way to navigate without going into this destructive downward spiral.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for
You're welcome.
for getting me there. I did not want to make this about me, but hopefully I think people will. There's a lot of things that we talked about today. And I know that we could talk for hours and hours and hours. It just means I'll have to have you back on here at some point. But I think the overall message is, everything I've asked you today, you've placed it back upon the shoulders of the individual, saying, if in order for you to attract your dream person, your dream partner, you have to do the work.
Correct.
You have to become your 100% authentic self. Because then it's not an effort. You just convey what you are outwardly, and you'll attract what you are. Like attracts like. So we all need to do the work and stop blaming it on external factors.
And the running is so much more uncomfortable than actually seeing and getting there. And yes, it is important to be able to meet ourselves, because that's when it actually becomes enjoyable. Then there isn't fear in the relationship anymore, because you get to just be you.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more freeing than that.
Yeah.
I joke, but it's true. I just have to exist to be loved at this point.
Yeah.
And that is the most freeing feeling for someone who was consistently in relationships where I felt scrutinized and criticized and never good enough. To have that now is the most expansive and empowering feeling. I feel like I can do anything.
Yeah.
And, not just because I have an amazing man by my side, but because I know what I'm capable of doing. I know the mountain I'm capable of climbing, and it's always there for me.
Yeah.
Right? That's the beautiful part about work like this, is it's always at your fingertips. You always have access to it, to ask yourself a deeper question, a harder question, to allow yourself to go there. And, at the end of it, we feel lighter and we feel better. And that's the whole point.
Yeah.
The whole point is to have fun.
That's the whole point. And to not, and to,
Not necessarily, you don't need to be bored, right? It's
Yeah.
not going to last forever. But to be able to allow yourself to have fun, you also have to allow yourself to feel the duality of boredom sometimes.
Yeah. Emily, you are a master of your craft. You opened me up with one question. You are still doing the coaching and all that, correct?
I am, yes.
Okay. So for individuals that have seen the mastery of what you do, just really us having an authentic conversation. But I mean, I felt so comfortable just having this, and I think you just asked the questions because genuinely you care. I can feel that. Let's say somebody wants to be able to experience what it is like that you have to offer and what you do. How do they find you?
Yeah, well, I would love to connect with you guys on Instagram. So it's at Emily Freeman Coaching. And if you are interested in working together, there is a link in my bio where you can apply to work together one-on-one. I also have group programs. So I am about to open enrollment for my most coveted group for men. So this is a cohort that lasts 12 weeks. It's called the Empowered Masculine. And you are going to enter the room with a whole bunch of other high-performing men who are ready to attract their dream woman to have conversations like this and to really understand what it means to experience a fulfilling relationship, and not one that we just look at on paper as perfection, but one that actually feels good. And then I have some courses as well. So if you have any questions about that, just shoot me a DM. I love to talk to anybody who reaches out to me. So yeah, I would love to connect with you guys there.
Awesome. So on your Instagram, everything funnels through there.
Yeah.
I have a feeling many people will jump that. They should jump on it. I know men need to be doing more of the work. We need to be more responsible with this. It's foreign to us, but ultimately it leads to a much more fulfilling life.
Yes.
So we'll just keep pushing these conversations out there, and hopefully it'll inspire others. So
love it.
Emily, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.